Again, my name is Gwen Purushotham. My husband Sam and I moved from Nashville to Wells in May of 2016. New England is home to us, though we have never lived in Maine. Our 3 children and their families live in Massachusetts, New York, and Virginia, further than we would like. Yet we feel blessed to live in a community that cares for neighbors near and far and is located in a beautiful place near land reserves, a conservation land, and the beautiful ocean. Retirement affords us time to pursue our various hobbies, to connect more frequently with family and friends, and to do a bit of traveling. We've been worshiping at Church on the Cape regularly since last June, when I completed a 1-year interim appointment as superintendent for the New Hampshire district, and more sporadically, we worshiped here before that. I am now happily retired and unemployed, and I like it that way. So when Pastor Pat, I hear some resonance out there. So when Pastor Pat asked me to preach, I wanted to say no thank you, but for better or for worse, here I am. The text for this morning's sermon is the gospel reading assigned for the 7th Sunday after Pentecost. As is the case with lectionary preaching, which has always been my practice, it is a text I did not choose, but I believe chose us. I'll begin with a recent experience that some of you may be able to identify with, those of you who have traveled. Sam and I just returned from a wonderful 10-day cruise of the British Isles that began in London and took us to Scilly, Fishguard, Holyhead, Dublin, Belfast, Barra, Stornoway, Stromness, Aberdeen, and finally to Edinburgh. It was a beautiful journey, but I must say, packing and checking baggage is really a big deal. First, there are decisions about what to pack for the journey. Will we need warm clothes or cool clothes or both? Will the dress be casual? Should we pack any formal wear? What kind of shoes do we need? And how many pairs? And in order to take this journey, we needed to follow instructions from the cruise people very carefully. We were told by the cruise line to pack layers of clothing that could be added or removed for the changing temperatures typical of the weather in the British Isles. We were also instructed to pack rain gear, sturdy shoes, and walking sticks for uneven terrain, a backpack or a small bag for carrying a water bottle, extra layers of clothing, an umbrella, and anything else we might need for a day trip. And don't forget to leave some space for items that we might want to purchase on the trip. We were forewarned that an ocean cruise on a small ship is quite different from a river cruise, and to be sure to take sea bands or Dramamine to prevent seasickness. We were also reminded more than once to be sure to pack our medications, passports, travel documents, name tags, luggage tags, and cash, and a list of our medications or other items that we might need in transit in our carry-on bags, not in our checked luggage. And that's not all. The airline, as you know, has specifications for baggage with which we needed to comply, including weight limit and the number and size of the bags. As you know, there are regulations about what can and cannot be carried on board the plane. No liquids in excess of 3 ounces, no sharp objects, no explosives, and a limit of 1 carry-on and 1 small handbag per person. And we weren't left, fortunately, to our own devices when it came to checking our baggage. There were others involved. Our bags were weighed by airline representatives when we checked in. And we watched one poor soul just ahead of us in the check-in line, as he struggled with these 2 huge, overweight, oversized suitcases, and I'm not sure how he made out. And then, of course, there's security, including x-rays of our hand luggage and our bodies to ensure we're not carrying anything deliberately or inadvertently that could endanger ourselves or other passengers. Finally, we were periodically reminded by loudspeaker to watch our bags at all times and that unattended baggage would be removed by the airport police. That's just for the trip going. I won't tell you about the return trip. Suffice it to say that checking baggage is a big deal, but it is essential to healthy and safe travel. So let's turn now to the 6th chapter of the Gospel of Mark. Here we find Jesus with his disciples in his hometown of Nazareth. He's just come from time spent on both sides of the Sea of Galilee, among people who did not know him. He's performed many miracles there, including casting out demons from a possessed man, healing a woman with a hemorrhage, and restoring Jairus' daughter, presumed to be dead, to new life. Now Jesus has returned to the town where he grew up. He goes to the synagogue on the Sabbath, as is his custom, and he teaches to a congregation that knows him. These folks remember him from his childhood. He is Jesus, the little boy who ran around their neighborhood with the other kids. He is the son of Mary and Joseph, the carpenter. These folks are well acquainted with Jesus' family, some of whom are, in fact, present with them in the synagogue on the day Jesus is visiting. The townsfolks are all ears. They listen attentively to what Jesus is saying, and they are astounded by his wisdom and his deeds of power. And they wonder, where did he, the carpenter's son, the little Jesus from their neighborhood, the kid from the working class family, where did he get all his wisdom? And as Jesus continues speaking, there is a sudden change of mood. In the blink of an eye, familiarity turns to contempt. Something doesn't compute for the townsfolk. Jesus' wisdom and deeds of power do not fit within their conceptual framework of who he is. They don't coincide with what they know about Jesus' family background. There is no room in their minds to believe him. And their wonder, where did he get all this wisdom, changes to contempt. Just who does he think he is? These folks were first captivated by Jesus. Now they take offense at him. Mark doesn't tell us what Jesus specifically said that might have precipitated this sudden change of mood, only that the people took offense. Their mental baggage does not permit them to take in the wisdom that Jesus expounds. They simply can't put it together with what they know, and they are offended. Jesus responds to their offense with these words: "Prophets are not without honor except in their hometown and among their own kin and in their own house." His words are not spoken in anger or defense or retaliation. And he does not push himself on these folks or argue with them or try to explain to them. He doesn't say to them, "Let me show you a thing or two. You think you're so smart? I'll prove to you who I am and what I can do." No, there is none of this in Jesus' response or in his tone. He simply states the way it is. Prophets are not without honor except in their hometown and among their own kin and in their own house. It's just the way it is. And then Mark tells us Jesus was amazed at their unbelief. And it is amazing. The people who knew him, or at least thought they knew him, rejected him. And as a result, except for being able to heal a few sick people, Jesus could not do any deed of power in Nazareth. This isn't because Jesus didn't want to perform acts of power among his own people, but rather because their rejection of him would not permit him to do so. And they rejected him because he didn't fit their preconceived notions about who he was and who could teach in the synagogue. There was no room in their minds for Jesus' words or actions within their conceptual framework. Though Jesus had performed countless deeds of power among those who did not know him, he could not do the same in his own hometown or among his own kin. And then in the next section of today's gospel lesson, we read about what happens immediately following Jesus' rejection by the people of Nazareth. He then went about among the villages teaching. He didn't hang around in Nazareth. He didn't stay where the people took offense at him. He didn't stay where he was prevented by their unbelief from performing his ministry. He moved on. He moved on and called the 12 and sent them out. In his book, Say It to the Mountain, Ched Myers points out that this is the second time in Mark that Mark follows the rejection in the synagogue with the commissioning of the disciples. And this time, Mark is more interested in the ground rules than he is in the mission itself. Jesus sends the 12 out, 2 by 2, and gives them authority over unclean spirits. Note that in Scripture, authority is always conferred for the purpose of healing, preaching, and teaching, never for ego needs. And then Jesus gives some ground rules to the disciples. And these are the ground rules. Take nothing for the journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, and do not put on 2 tunics. Further, stay where you are received, and where you are not, shake off the dust from your feet and move on. The sparse list of what can be taken on this journey is not a matter of asceticism. The ground rules are not meant to make their journey more laborious or to deny the disciples pleasure. Rather, they are a matter of instructing the disciples about what must be left behind in order for them to be able to receive, the hospitality in the communities where they will travel and carry out their ministry. Traveling lightly will ensure their dependence upon the hospitality of the village people among whom they will live and work. So 2 by 2, the disciples are sent out with next to nothing. And they travel into the villages and they proclaim that all should repent. They cast out many demons and anoint with oil many who were sick, and they cure them. A stark contrast to what Jesus was able to do in his hometown of Nazareth. The Reverend Larry Hayward, was the minister, I don't know if he still is, at the Westminster Presbyterian Church in Alexandria, Virginia, told about an experience he had during the first days of one of his churches. He met an 8-year-old boy named Rob and his father when he was unloading boxes in his office. And Rob had a strong sense of his place in the church. And he informed his new pastor on his first meeting with him, "This is my church." The first time Pastor Hayward gave a children's sermon, Rob was seated in the back row with the other children, with his arms folded across his chest. Pastor Hayward said he didn't remember exactly what he said, but at one point, Rob unclenched his arms, raised his hand, and said, "In order to follow Jesus, you have to leave something behind." Hayward goes on to say, Sometimes what we have to leave behind isn't a deeply ingrained view of the world. It may be that in order to follow Jesus, we have to leave behind the way we thought our life would turn out. We may have to leave behind the need to be right. We may have to leave behind a resentment, a worry, an effort to maintain the status quo, a treasured tradition. We may have to leave behind the way we thought our life would turn out, the shape and form we thought our family would take, who we thought we would love versus who we do love. We may even have to leave behind a perception of God and the church. Friends, baggage is not just what we carry in our suitcases. It is what we carry in our hearts and our heads. It is not just what we declare on our re-entry forms when we return from travel abroad. It is the unspoken script that scrolls in our heads while we navigate our way through life and respond to the people and events we encounter. Baggage is a set of assumptions, often invisible, that determine how we see and what judgments we make about others. And further, baggage is something that not only individuals carry, but organizations and groups, and shall I say, churches carry. That's why baggage checks are essential. They help us to leave behind baggage that will not serve us well for the journey. They open us to the prophets in our midst. They free us for the mission for which we are called and sent. They permit Jesus to perform deeds of power in our midst. They perfect us in love. They help us to let go of what weighs us down and holds back. Perhaps now is a good time for a baggage check.